Welcome to Evening Whispers of Love. In this story, we meet Laura, a well-to-do girl living in New York when a stock market crash forces her to have to move in with her aunt in Virginia. Life has changed suddenly in every way it could, but is there love waiting for her? Sit back, relax, and get ready to hear Laura's story. Chapter 1. The night everything changed. New York City had never felt so strangely quiet. The usual hum of automobiles, streetcars, and late-night chatter drifted faintly through the tall windows of the Whitford apartment, but inside, the silence was thick enough to press against the walls. The lamps were turned low, casting long amber shadows across the parlor's polished floors and velvet chairs. A fire crackled in the marble hearth, though even its warmth felt subdued. Laura Whitford sat curled in the corner of the sofa, her silk dressing gown gathered around her knees. She had been pretending to read the same page of Harper's Bazaar for nearly half an hour, but her eyes kept drifting to her parents across the room. Her father stood near the fireplace, one hand braced on the mantel, the other rubbing his forehead. His spectacles hung low on his nose, and the lines around his mouth seemed deeper than they had that morning. Her mother sat stiffly in her armchair, fingers twisting the pearls at her throat. They spoke in low voices, too low for Laura to hear, but she didn't need the words. She had heard enough all day. The crash, the panic, the banks, the losses. Her father, a man who had always seemed carved from certainty, looked shaken. Laura closed the magazine with a soft thud. "You're whispering," she said, trying to sound light. "That's never a good sign." Her parents exchanged a glance, one of those silent conversations adults seem to have mastered. Her mother rose first. "Darling, come sit with us." Laura's stomach tightened. She obeyed, crossing the room and settling into the chair opposite them. The fire popped sharply, as if punctuating the moment. Her father cleared his throat. "Laura, things are changing. The market, well, you know what happened today." "I know it was bad," she said. "Everyone knows. But it's not as if we're ruined." She forced a small laugh. "We're Whitfords." Her father didn't smile. "We're not ruined," he said carefully, "but we're exposed. And the city is going to be unpredictable for a while. There will be unrest, uncertainty. I don't want you caught in the middle of it." Laura blinked. "Caught in the middle of what?" "I'm not planning to run into the streets waving stock certificates." Her mother stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We've been talking, sweetheart, and we think it would be best if you spent some time away from the city." "Where?" Laura asked, though dread was already creeping up her spine. "With your Aunt Margaret," her mother said softly. "In Virginia." Laura stared at her. "Virginia? The farm Virginia? With the chickens and the mud and the—" She stopped herself before saying smell. Her father sighed. "It's peaceful there. Safe. And Margaret could use the help." "Help?" Laura repeated, incredulous. "I don't even know how to milk a cow." "You won't be asked to milk anything," her mother said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sure. "But you'll have space, fresh air, time to think." "I don't need time to think," Laura protested. "I need to stay here. My friends are here. My life is here." Her father's voice softened. "Your life is more important than your social calendar." Laura opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't used to hearing that tone from him, gentle but immovable. The fire crackled again, filling the silence. Finally, she whispered, "Do I have a choice?" Her mother knelt beside her. "We wouldn't ask this if we didn't believe it was necessary." Which meant no. Laura swallowed hard. She wasn't accustomed to being denied anything. She wasn't accustomed to being frightened, either, but the look in her father's eyes unsettled her more than the idea of Virginia ever could. "When do I leave?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow," her father said. "Tomorrow." She shot to her feet. "You can't be serious." "We are," he said. "The sooner you're settled, the better." Laura paced to the window, staring down at the glittering city lights. She had always loved New York. The noise, the glamour, the endless possibility. She had never imagined being sent away from it like a child being packed off to boarding school. Her mother approached her again, voice gentle. "It won't be forever." "It will feel like it," Laura muttered. Her father stepped beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "I know this is difficult, but you're strong, Laura. Stronger than you think. She didn't feel strong. She felt small and powerless and terribly, terribly young. But she also loved her parents, more than she loved her comfort, her dresses, or her perfectly arranged life. So she nodded. "All right," she said. "I'll go." Her mother exhaled with relief and pulled her into a tight embrace. Her father kissed the top of her head. Outside, a horn blared somewhere down Fifth Avenue. The city moved on, unaware that Laura Whitford's world had just shifted beneath her feet. As she stood between her parents, staring out at the glittering skyline, she had no idea that the farm in Virginia, quiet, rustic, and utterly foreign, would be the place where everything she thought she knew about herself would change. And she certainly didn't know that someone there was waiting to change her life even more. Chapter 2. A Different Kind of Arrival. The train lurched as it slowed, its whistle echoing across the quiet Virginia hills. Laura pressed her gloved hand to the window, peering out at the small station platform. It was little more than a wooden shelter, a bench, and a sign that read Hawthorne Junction in fading paint. No crowds, no taxis, no glittering lights, just open sky and the smell of damp earth. She exhaled sharply. "Well," she murmured, "this is different." The porter handed down her luggage, 3 trunks, 2 hat boxes, and a valise, stacking them in a precarious tower beside her. Laura stepped onto the platform, her heels clicking against the worn boards. The air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of pine and something else she couldn't quite place. Milk, she realized. Fresh milk. A battered Ford truck rattled into view, coughing as it came to a stop. The driver's door swung open, and a woman in a faded blue dress and sturdy boots climbed out, waving enthusiastically. "Laura! Oh, my stars, look at you!" Aunt Margaret hurried forward, arms open. She smelled faintly of hay and lavender soap. Laura forced a smile. "Aunt Margaret, it's lovely to see you. And you, dear. Though I must say, I wasn't expecting quite so many trunks." Margaret eyed the stack with a mixture of amusement and concern. "We'll make it work." Laura glanced at the truck bed, which already held several metal milk cans. "Will they fit?" "We'll find a way," Margaret said cheerfully. Farm life is all about improvising. Improvising. Laura swallowed. They managed to wedge the trunks into the truck bed, though one hat box had to sit on Laura's lap. As they drove, the road wound between rolling fields and clusters of trees. The city felt impossibly far away. "So," Margaret said over the rumble of the engine, "your parents wrote that things have been difficult up north." Laura stared ahead. "They're worried. Everyone is. Well, you'll have peace here. And work to keep your hands busy." Margaret smiled warmly. Nothing clears the mind like a good day's labor. "Labor?" Laura repeated, alarmed. "Oh, nothing too strenuous. But we're a dairy farm, dear. Cows don't take holidays." Laura tightened her grip on the hat box. After another mile, the farmhouse came into view, a small white structure with peeling paint, a wraparound porch, and a red barn standing proudly behind it. Chickens scattered as the truck approached. A dog barked from somewhere near the barn. It was quaint. That was the polite word. Not grand, not elegant, not remotely like home. Margaret parked beside the porch. "Well, here we are." Laura stepped out slowly, taking in the scene. The barn doors were open, revealing rows of stalls and the soft, rhythmic sounds of cows shifting on straw. The air was thick with the scent of hay, earth, and livestock. She wrinkled her nose before she could stop herself. Margaret laughed. "You'll get used to it. Everyone does." "I'm sure," Laura said, though she wasn't sure at all. A tall young man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He had sun-browned skin, dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and sleeves rolled to his elbows. His eyes, steady, observant, landed on Laura with mild curiosity. "Laura, this is Daniel," Margaret said. "He helps with the milking and the morning rounds." Daniel nodded politely. "Ma'am." Laura blinked. No one her age had ever called her ma'am before. "Hello," she said, trying to sound composed. "You'll be seeing plenty of him," Margaret added. "He's here most mornings and evenings." Daniel gave a small, unreadable smile. "Welcome to Hawthorne Farm." Laura managed a stiff nod. "Thank you." As he returned to the barn, Laura watched him go, unsure whether she felt more intimidated by the cows or the quiet confidence in his stride. Margaret looped an arm through hers. "Come inside. I'll show you your room. It's small, but it has a lovely view of the pasture." Small. Pasture. None of these words belonged in Laura's vocabulary. Chapter 3. Dawn comes early. Laura woke to the sound of a rooster. Not a distant, charming countryside rooster, but a shockingly loud, insistent creature that seemed to be standing directly beneath her window. She groaned, pulling the quilt over her head. The quilt smelled faintly of cedar and sunshine, pleasant, but not enough to soften the blow of being awake before sunrise. Aunt Margaret's voice floated up the stairs. "Laura, dear, breakfast in 10 minutes. And wear something you don't mind getting dirty." Dirty. The word alone made her wince. She dressed reluctantly in a simple blouse and skirt, one of the few practical outfits she'd packed, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was warm, filled with the scent of biscuits and fresh butter. Margaret moved briskly between the stove and the table, humming. "You look lovely," Margaret said, sliding a plate toward her. "Eat up. Daniel's already started the morning milking." Laura paused mid-bite. "Daniel is here? Now?" "Of course. Cows don't wait." Laura wasn't sure whether she was more annoyed at the cows or the fact that Daniel seemed to be effortlessly competent at everything she wasn't. After breakfast, Margaret handed her a pair of boots, sturdy, brown, and absolutely hideous. "You'll need these." Laura stared at them. "Are you sure there isn't another pair? Something smaller?" "They'll do just fine," Margaret said, already heading toward the door. Outside, the morning air was crisp, the sky streaked with pale pink. The barn loomed ahead, its doors open. Inside, the rhythmic sound of milk hitting metal echoed softly. Daniel stood beside one of the cows, sleeves rolled up, hands steady. He glanced over his shoulder as they entered. "Morning," he said. Laura nodded, trying not to stare at the way the early light caught the curve of his jaw. "Good morning. You're just in time," he added. "We've got a few more to finish." "We," Laura repeated. Margaret clapped her hands. "Yes, dear. You'll be helping Daniel today." Laura blinked. "Helping with the cows?" Daniel's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Don't worry. They're friendlier than they look." "I doubt that," she muttered. Margaret left them with a cheerful wave, and suddenly Laura was alone with Daniel, the cows, and the overwhelming smell of hay and livestock. Daniel gestured to an empty stool beside another cow. "You can start here." Laura eyed the cow warily. "Does it kick?" "Only if you give her a reason." "That's not comforting." He chuckled, a warm, low sound that made her stomach flutter in a way she absolutely did not approve of. "Here," he said, stepping closer. "Let me show you." He guided her hands gently, his fingers brushing hers. The contact was brief, but enough to send a surprising spark up her arm. She hoped he didn't notice. "See," he said. "Not so bad." Laura tried again, this time on her own. The cow shifted, and she squeaked, nearly falling off the stool. Daniel steadied her with one hand on her elbow. "Easy. I'm not cut out for this," she said, cheeks warm. "You will be," he replied. "Give it time." She glanced at him. His expression was calm, patient, nothing like the smug amusement she'd expected. He wasn't mocking her. He was encouraging her. That was somehow worse. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the barn filled with soft sounds, cows breathing, milk hitting metal, the rustle of straw. Laura's hands were clumsy, but she was trying. Daniel noticed. "You're doing better than most city folks," he said. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It is." She looked away quickly, pretending to focus on the cow. Her heart was beating faster than it should. When they finished, Daniel carried the full pails to the cooler. Laura followed, brushing straw from her skirt. "So," he said, leaning against the barn wall. "How long are you staying?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Until things settle down in New York." He nodded. "Could be a while." She frowned. "You say that like it's a good thing." He shrugged, not saying anything. "Just that you might find more here than you expect." She opened her mouth to retort, but the words caught. His eyes were steady, warm, and entirely too perceptive. "I doubt that," she said softly. Daniel smiled, not a smirk, Not a tease, but something genuine. We'll see. Outside, the sun finally crested the hills, bathing the farm in gold. Laura stepped into the light, boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. She felt out of place, unprepared, and utterly overwhelmed. But as Daniel walked beside her, carrying the last pail of milk, she felt something else too. A flicker of possibility. But she followed her aunt up the porch steps, her shoes tapping softly against the wood. The farmhouse door creaked as it opened, revealing a cozy interior with braided rugs, mismatched furniture, and the faint aroma of something baking. It wasn't New York. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what she wanted. But as she stepped inside, a breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the distant lowing of cows and the rustle of leaves. And for the first time since the crash, the world felt still. Not safe, exactly, but steady. Laura took a breath. Maybe she could survive this. Maybe she could even learn something. And somewhere outside, in the fading afternoon light, Daniel led a cow into the milking stall, unaware that the spoiled banker's daughter from New York was about to turn his quiet world upside down. Chapter 4. Learning the Rhythm. Laura woke the next morning with sore arms, sore legs, and a sore pride she didn't dare admit aloud. She dressed slowly, wincing as she bent to pull on the farm boots. They still looked ridiculous, but at least she could walk in them now without wobbling. Downstairs, Aunt Margaret was already bustling around the kitchen, humming as she flipped something in a cast-iron skillet. "Morning, dear. Daniel's out in the barn. He said to send you along when you're ready." Laura paused mid-step. "He asked for me?" Margaret smiled without looking up. "He said you did well yesterday." Laura felt a strange flutter in her chest. "I nearly fell off the stool." Everyone nearly falls off the stool their first day. That's not comforting. Margaret laughed. "Eat something before you go." After breakfast, Laura stepped outside. The morning was warmer than the day before, sunlight spilling across the fields in soft gold. The barn doors were open again, and she could hear Daniel moving inside. She took a breath and walked in. Daniel was stacking bales of hay, lifting them with an ease that made Laura's arms ache in sympathy. He glanced over his shoulder when he heard her. "Morning." His voice was calm, steady, like he'd been expecting her. "Good morning," she replied, trying not to sound breathless from the walk across the yard. "You're right on time," he said. "We've got a full list today." "A list," she echoed. He handed her a small clipboard. The handwriting was neat, surprisingly, so for someone who worked with his hands. "Morning tasks: feed calves, sweep south aisle, collect eggs, help with milking if needed." Laura stared at it. "This looks like a lot." "It is," he said. "But you won't be doing it alone." She looked up. He was closer than she'd realized. Close enough that she could see the faint freckles across his nose, the way his hair curled slightly at the ends from the morning humidity. She stepped back before she forgot how to breathe. "Let's start with the calves," he said, pretending not to notice. They walked to the smaller barn where the calves were kept. The animals were surprisingly adorable, big eyes, soft noses, wobbly legs. One nudged her hand, and she let out a startled laugh. "They like you," Daniel said. "They're cute," she admitted. "Don't sound so shocked." "I'm not shocked," she said quickly. "Just surprised." He raised an eyebrow. "That's the same thing." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He was right, and he knew it. They fed the calves together, Daniel showing her how to hold the bottle properly. When one calf pushed too hard and nearly knocked her over, he caught her by the waist, steadying her. For a moment, neither of them moved. His hands were warm. His breath brushed her cheek. Her heart thudded in her chest, loud enough she was certain he could hear it. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "They get excited at feeding time." "Yes," she said, though her voice came out softer than she intended. They finished the calves, then moved on to sweeping the aisle. Laura tried to keep up, but her strokes were uneven, and the broom felt heavier than it should. Daniel watched her for a moment, then stepped behind her, guiding her hands again, just like he had with the milking stool. "You're holding it too high," he said. "Here." His hand slid down the broom handle, brushing hers. She felt the contact, all the way to her toes. "Better," he murmured. She swallowed. "You're very patient." He smiled. "You're trying. That's what matters." She didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on sweeping. When they finished, they stepped outside into the sunlight. The fields stretched out before them, green and endless. Laura felt a strange sense of accomplishment, small but real. Daniel leaned against the fence, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're doing well," he said. "I'm doing something," she replied. He laughed softly. "You're doing more than you think." She looked at him then, really looked. The warmth in his eyes wasn't pity. It wasn't amusement. It was admiration. And something else she wasn't ready to name. A breeze rustled the grass. A cow mooed somewhere in the distance. The world felt still for a moment, suspended between what she had been and what she was becoming. Daniel pushed off the fence. "Come on. We've still got eggs to collect." Laura followed him, her steps lighter than they'd been all morning. She wasn't sure she liked farm life yet, but she was starting to like the person she was becoming in it, and she was definitely starting to like Daniel. Chapter 5. The edges begin to soften. By the end of her first week, Laura had learned 3 things. Cows had absolutely no respect for personal space. Chickens were far more judgmental than anyone admitted. Daniel was impossible to ignore. She tried, truly, but he had a way of appearing whenever she was struggling, offering help without making her feel foolish. It was infuriating and disarming, and something else she didn't want to name yet. A morning in the pasture. The sun was barely above the horizon when Laura followed Daniel out to the pasture. Dew clung to the grass, sparkling like tiny diamonds. She tucked her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "Cold?" Daniel asked, glancing back. "A little," she admitted. He nodded toward the fence. "It warms up fast. Virginia mornings don't stay chilly for long." She wasn't sure if he meant the weather or something else. They reached the gate, and Daniel lifted the latch with one hand. The cows looked up from their grazing, ears flicking. "Today," he said, "you're learning how to lead them in." Laura blinked. "Lead them? As in a walk with them." "As in walk ahead of them," he corrected. "They follow confidence." She stared at the nearest cow, who stared back with large, unimpressed eyes. "I don't think she sees me as a leader." Daniel's mouth curved. "Try anyway." She stepped forward, heart thudding. "Come on," she said softly. "This way." The cow blinked. Daniel leaned close enough that she felt the warmth of him. "You have to mean it." "How does one mean it to a cow?" "Like this." He stepped beside her, voice low. Straight spine. Firm steps. No hesitation. She tried again. Straight spine. Firm steps. Absolutely no hesitation. The cow followed. Laura gasped. "She's actually listening," Daniel finished. "Told you." She turned to him, unable to hide her smile. "Maybe I'm not hopeless after all." His eyes softened. "I never thought you were." The words lingered in the air between them, warm and startling. Aunt Margaret notices everything. Later that afternoon, Laura helped Margaret shell peas on the porch. The rocking chairs creaked gently, and the scent of honeysuckle drifted from the trellis. "You're settling in nicely," Margaret said. "I'm surviving," Laura replied, though she couldn't keep the small smile from her lips. "And Daniel's been a good teacher." Laura froze mid-shell. "He's patient. Him. That's all." "Of course." Laura narrowed her eyes. "Aunt Margaret." Margaret chuckled. "I'm only saying he's a fine young man. Hard-working. Kind. And he seems to enjoy your company." Laura felt her cheeks warm. "He's just being polite. Polite men don't look at girls the way he looks at you." Laura nearly dropped a pea. "He doesn't look at me any particular way." Margaret gave her a knowing smile. "If you say so." Laura stared out at the fields, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. An evening in the barn. That evening, Laura returned to the barn to fetch a basket she'd forgotten. The sun was setting, casting long golden beams through the slats. Dust motes floated like tiny stars. Daniel was there, repairing a wooden stall door. He looked up when she entered. "Forgot something?" he asked. "My basket," she said, pointing. He nodded and returned to his work. The rhythmic tap of his hammer filled the quiet. Laura hesitated, then stepped closer. "You work late. Animals don't care what time it is." She leaned against a post. "Do you ever get tired of it?" He paused, considering. "Sometimes. But it's honest work." And it matters. She watched him for a moment, the sure movements of his hands, the calm focus in his expression. You make it look easy, she said. It's not, he replied. But you're learning fast. She laughed softly. I'm learning slowly. Slow is still learning. He set the hammer down and turned to face her fully. The fading light caught his eyes, turning them a warm, deep brown. You've changed since you got here, he said quietly. Laura's breath caught. Change how? You're not just doing the work. You're trying. You're opening up. She felt suddenly unsteady. I didn't realize I was closed. You were, he said gently. But not anymore. The barn felt too still, too warm, too full of something she wasn't ready to name. She stepped back, clutching her basket. I should go help with supper. Daniel nodded, though his gaze lingered. See you in the morning. As she walked out into the twilight, her heart beat faster than it should. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew it was happening, and she knew Daniel was at the center of it. Chapter 6: The Shift in the Air. By the second week, Laura no longer woke up dreading the barn. She still disliked the rooster. She still tripped over the occasional bucket. But something had changed, quietly, steadily, like the way dawn slips into morning without anyone noticing the exact moment. And Daniel noticed. He noticed the way she pushed her hair behind her ear when she concentrated. He noticed how she no longer flinched when a cow brushed against her. He noticed how she laughed now, really laughed, when the calves nibbled her sleeves. He noticed everything. A small accident, a big moment. It happened on a Tuesday. Laura was carrying a pail of feed across the barn when her boot caught on a loose board. She stumbled forward with a startled gasp. Before she could hit the ground, Daniel's arms wrapped around her, steady and sure. Careful, he murmured. Her hands clutched his shirt. His breath brushed her temple. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Sorry, she whispered. You're fine. His voice was low, warm. I've got you. She looked up. He was closer than she'd ever let him be. His eyes weren't just warm, they were soft, unguarded. Something flickered there, something unmistakable. He realized it too. He stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. You should watch that board. Been meaning to fix it. Laura nodded, though her pulse was still racing. Right. The board. But Daniel didn't walk away. He lingered, studying her with a new intensity, like he was seeing her for the first time, or perhaps admitting he'd been seeing her for a while. Aunt Margaret, again being right. That evening, Laura helped Margaret hang laundry on the line. The sky was streaked with lavender and rose, the air warm and still. You're glowing, Margaret said casually. I am not. You are. And Daniel's been smiling more than usual. Laura nearly dropped a sheet. Aunt Margaret! What? I'm old, not blind. Laura pressed her lips together, trying to hide the smile tugging at them. He's just kind. He's more than kind, Margaret said. And he's taken with you. Laura's heart fluttered. You don't know that. Oh, I do. He looks at you like a man who's trying very hard not to look at you. Laura didn't have an answer for that. The walk back from the pasture. Later, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Daniel and Laura walked back from the pasture together. The cows were settled, the chores done, and the world felt hushed. You did good today, Daniel said. Thank you, she replied. I'm trying. I can tell. They walked a few more steps in silence. Then Daniel stopped. Laura! She turned to him. He looked almost nervous, something she'd never seen on him before. His hands flexed at his sides, as if he wasn't sure what to do with them. I wasn't sure about you at first, he admitted. Thought you'd last a day. Maybe two. I thought the same, she said softly. But you stayed. His voice dropped. And I'm glad you did. Her breath caught. He took a small step closer. Not touching her, just close enough that she felt the warmth of him. I like who you're becoming here, he said. And I like being around you. The words were simple, honest, and they hit her harder than any grand declaration could have. She swallowed. I like being around you, too. His smile was slow, genuine, and devastating. Good, he said. They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the space between them charged with something new, something neither of them could ignore anymore. Chapter 7: What the Heart Admits. The next few days passed in a blur of chores, sunlight, and moments Laura couldn't quite name. Daniel was everywhere, lifting hay bales, repairing fences, brushing down horses, and every time she caught sight of him, something warm and unsettling stirred in her chest. And Daniel was trying very hard not to stare at her. He failed often. A storm rolls in. The sky darkened earlier than usual that afternoon, clouds gathering low and heavy over the hills. Laura was helping Daniel secure the barn doors when the first rumble of thunder rolled across the fields. "We should hurry," he said. "Storm's coming fast." "I can see that," she replied, brushing hair from her face as the wind picked up. They worked quickly, tying ropes, checking latches. Rain began to fall, first a sprinkle, then a sudden downpour that soaked them both in seconds. Inside, Daniel shouted over the wind. They dashed into the barn, slamming the door behind them. The storm roared outside, rain hammering the roof like 1,000 fists. Laura pushed wet hair from her eyes, laughing breathlessly. "Well, that was—" She stopped. Daniel was staring at her. Not politely, not casually, but with a raw, unguarded intensity that made her heart stumble. Her blouse clung to her from the rain, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. She looked alive in a way she never had in New York. And Daniel saw it. "Laura," he said quietly. She swallowed. "Yes." He stepped closer, slowly, as if giving her time to stop him. She didn't. "You've changed everything around here," he said. "Everything." Her breath caught. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he murmured. "That's why." Another step. Close enough that she felt the heat of him despite the cold rain dripping from her clothes. "I tried not to feel this," he admitted. "Tried harder than I should have." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Daniel!" He reached up, brushing a raindrop from her cheek with the back of his knuckle. The touch was feather-light, reverent. "You're not the girl who arrived here," he said. "You're stronger, kinder, real." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I didn't know I could be." "You can," he said. "You are." The storm cracked overhead, lightning flashing through the slats. Laura didn't flinch. She couldn't look away from him. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. She didn't. Instead, she stepped into him, just enough that their breath mingled, just enough that the space between them vanished. "I don't want you to stop," she said. Daniel exhaled, a sound of relief and surrender all at once. And then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hesitant. It was warm and certain, like he'd been waiting for her since the moment she stepped off the train. Laura's hand slid up his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and the storm outside raged on unnoticed. When they finally parted, breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things," he said. "Yes," she whispered. "It does." Chapter 8. The World Comes Calling. The storm passed by morning, leaving the fields washed clean and glittering. But nothing inside Laura felt calm. Every time she replayed the kiss in her mind, her breath caught all over again. Daniel was quieter that morning, steady, polite, but with a new awareness in the way he looked at her. Not shy, not uncertain, just careful, as if he knew one wrong move could break something fragile and new. Laura didn't mind the quiet. Her heart was loud enough for both of them. A letter from New York. It arrived just after breakfast. Aunt Margaret handed it to her with a soft, unreadable expression. The envelope was crisp, the handwriting unmistakable, her father's. Laura's stomach tightened. She stepped onto the porch and opened it. "My dearest Laura, your mother and I are relieved to say that things are stabilizing. Slowly, but enough that we feel you should return home soon. We miss you terribly. We will send for you at the end of the month. All our love, Father." Laura read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Return home. Leave Virginia. Leave the farm. Leave Daniel. Her chest tightened painfully. She folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket, but the weight of it stayed heavy. Daniel notices before she speaks. She found him in the barn, repairing a harness. He looked up immediately. "You're pale," he said. "Everything all right?" She tried to smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "I got a letter. Bad news." "I don't know." He set the harness aside and stepped closer. "Laura." She took a breath. "My parents want me to come home. Soon." Daniel's jaw tightened. Just slightly. But she saw it. I see, he said quietly. I don't know what to do, she admitted. New York is my home. But this place, it's changed me. His eyes softened. You've changed yourself. She looked down. I don't want to leave. He hesitated, just long enough for her to feel the ache of it, then said, Then don't. Her head snapped up. Daniel! I know your life is there, he said. I know I can't offer you what New York can. But I also know what I feel. And I'm not going to pretend I don't. Her breath caught. What do you feel? He stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth of him, the steadiness. I'm falling for you, he said simply. Faster than I meant to. Harder than I should. Her heart stuttered. And if you leave, he continued, voice low, I'll let you go. I won't stand in your way. But I need you to know what you're walking away from. She swallowed hard. Daniel! He reached out, brushing his thumb gently along her cheek. You don't have to decide today. But I have to decide, she whispered. Yes, he said. But not alone. A walk at dusk. That evening, they walked the fence line together. The sky was painted in soft gold and rose, the air warm and still. Laura's hand brushed Daniel's once. Twice. The third time, he took it. His fingers were rough, warm, certain. I don't want to lose this, she said quietly. You won't, he replied. Not unless you choose to. She looked up at him. What if I choose you? He stopped walking. The world seemed to stop with him. Then, he said, voice barely above a whisper, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Her breath trembled. The decision wasn't made yet, not fully, but something inside her shifted. A weight lifted. A path began to form. She squeezed his hand. Stay with me tonight, he said softly. Just walk with me. Talk with me. Let's figure this out together. She nodded, and they walked on, hand in hand, the future uncertain but no longer frightening. Chapter 9. A Choice Made in the Light. The morning after the letter, Laura woke before the rooster. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the farm waking up, the distant lowing of cows, the creak of the windmill, the quiet clatter of Aunt Margaret in the kitchen. It was a soundscape she hadn't known existed a month ago, and now she couldn't imagine not hearing it. She rose, dressed, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky pale with early light. Daniel was already in the barn, as always, moving with that steady, grounded confidence she had come to rely on. He looked up when she entered. Morning, he said softly. Morning. He studied her face for a long moment. You've decided. It wasn't a question. Laura nodded. I have. He set down the harness he'd been repairing and wiped his hands on a cloth, but his eyes never left hers. Well, he asked, voice low. She took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff. I'm staying, she said. I'm not going back to New York. Daniel froze, not in shock, but in something deeper. Relief. Wonder. A kind of joy he didn't know how to show all at once. Laura, he whispered. I don't know what the future looks like, she continued. I don't know what my parents will say. But I know what I want. And it's here. With you. With this life. With who I'm becoming. Daniel stepped toward her slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. You're sure, he said. I'm sure. He exhaled shakily, a sound she'd never heard from him before. Then he reached for her hands, holding them gently, reverently. I've been trying to figure out how to say this, he murmured. But I think I've known it for a while now. Her heart thudded. Daniel! He dropped to one knee. Laura gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The barn was quiet except for the soft rustle of hay and the distant morning birds. Daniel looked up at her with a steadiness that made her knees weak. I don't have much, he said. Not money. Not a grand house. Not the life you grew up with. But I can give you honesty. Hard work. A home that's built on something real. And I can love you more than I ever thought I'd love anyone. Her eyes filled with tears. Laura Whitford, will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Daniel. Of course I will. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and she kissed him, laughing and crying all at once. The barn doors were open, and the morning light poured in, warm and golden, as if the whole world had been waiting for this moment. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "You sure you won't miss the city?" he teased gently. "Maybe a little," she said. "But I won't miss it more than I'd miss you." He smiled, slow, radiant, the kind of smile that made her feel like she'd chosen right. "Then we'll make a life here," he said. "Together." And as the sun rose over the fields, Laura realized she wasn't giving up her old life. She was stepping into her real one. Well, that is the story of Laura and Daniel. Would you have stayed or moved back to New York? Do you think Daniel would have left with Laura to go back if she wanted? I hope you liked this story. I will be busy catching up on laundry, but stay tuned for more stories from Evening Whispers of Love.